We've done starter fertiliser trials for 3 or 4 years, and that's the first time we haven't had a response from DAP. So it's very strange and a bit depressing, really. But that's always been Simon's view of starter fertilisers, that they don't work every year. And he doesn't quite understand them either, I think. Right, well, this is what the field looked like on July the 17th. So it was barely knee-high on the 4th of July. I'm going to talk about 4 more trials. 2 of them were replicated, the foliar N and the digestate, and 2 of them were strip trials, which was the row width population and the subsoiling after drilling. So it is a challenging site. We've been through all of the things that make up the challenge, as it were. The exposed, above 50 metres adds 1 maturity class to your variety selection. If you look in the calculator that's in the book, you could say it's roughly 10 FAO units as well, but that is what we've got to get it so that when you look in the book, there are some 3 or 4 maturity class varieties in there for the biogas people to choose, because when you go through, when you use that calculator in the East Anglia, it's quite easy to come out with a class 1 or a class 2 or a class 3 as being the right variety for you to grow. So all the plots had the base fertiliser, and they were all made up to 150 kilos. And these were the treatments for the foliar N. Now, you may say this is not a foliar N trial, and you're quite right in a way, because only the last ones at the bottom of the list were put on late. The top ones is just nitrogen put on early. The Alzon 46 is a stabilised nitrogen that is slow release. So the big advantage is you can put it on early and it will be available when you need the foliar N. So we were kind of comparing the application of a proper foliar N at tasseling time with a slow release nitrogen put on pre-emergent. The next 3 were put on post-emergent. The Bio-N is a biological stimulant. And George is here, I think in the short but sweet, he's going to say a little bit more about that particular product. I won't say a lot about it now. And then you've got the genuine foliar N products at the bottom. Nitamin is Bun's product, and I know quite a lot of people are using Efficient 28. We had 2 different applications of Efficient 28 where to one we added an extra 40 kilograms of nitrogen, because there is a claim that although there's only 7 kilograms of nitrogen in the foliar feed, it's so efficient it gives you 40 kilograms of nitrogen. The Bun's product, they're not prepared to make that claim. So this is the result for the first group. So these are the pre-M treatments, and the none at 100% had 150 kilos of nitrogen in the form of ammonium nitrate. Okay, so the stabilized urea, the Alzon 46, has produced a statistical response. So there was more product, more yield, more dry matter yield as a result of using it. And the other products fall somewhere between it. And Econova Plus is another biological stimulant put on at pre-emergent and has obviously done better than just ammonium nitrate on its own. I should add, I think this site had about 80 millimetres of rain in June, so it could have been that there is a certain amount of leaching at the site, which may be why the ammonium nitrate didn't perform as well as it might have done. So these are the post-M treatments, and the BioN, the biological stimulant, here did very well, and that is a statistical response as well. It produced more than the none. And this is the pre-tassel treatments. Again, the nitamin has done a job, and so too has the efficient 28, where it had an extra 40 litres. In fact, there wasn't a lot of difference between 40 kilograms of nitrogen. In fact, there isn't a lot of difference between the two treatments, but the nitamin is a statistical response. The problem with foliar nitrogen is that it requires a very expensive application, because you want a very good, very wide, high clear sprayer to get through the crop without making any damage to the crop. And that has to be borne in mind. So it's only 1 year work. We're hoping to repeat the trial this year, and we stressed that it was on a site of very low fertility with no residual N. And we want to repeat the work in 2017, and I think on this sort of site we need to look at biostimulants as well, and particularly after what Paul Hoverson said this morning. Some of the foliar N treatments were repeated at Lackham, and here a much more fertile site, and there is no response. So this is worth taking into consideration, and don't waste money if you've got lots of available nitrogen in your soil, because you looked after it better over the years. The arable vegetable rotations are very cruel to nutrients and organic matter. Potatoes and sugar beet and all these crops, they wreak havoc with the structure and of the soil. The second trial I just speak very quickly about was the replicated digestate trial, and you can see how we put the digestate on the top, and it quite clearly changed the colour of the soil. It's quite a white soil. Basically, we got a good response from using the digestate. What we say it's got in it, it's got in it. It is good stuff, and basically the closer to you use it to the crop need, the bigger the response you're likely to get. Although actually here splitting it 25 cubic meters pre and 25 cubic meters post is even slightly better than the 50 cubic meters post. That's a lot of digestate to put on. We were kind of testing it just to see what it did, and actually 50 cubic meters is a lot for the ground to absorb in one go, and our normal applications are more like between 15 and 25. But it's good stuff, it works. I'm not going to say a lot about the row width and plant population trial. We did it, it was only a strip trial, and unfortunately, as we went up the field, the soil changes were quite changed a lot, which made it very difficult to compare treatments clearly. The high yield, we got a high yield, the highest yield from the twin row, but it was on the better land. So it's difficult to be to draw conclusions between the different drills. What was clear, though, is that maize will yield the same across very different row widths and plant populations, but where the plant populations were lower, the cobs were definitely bigger. And this year there wasn't a huge drought problem at the site because it's on chalk and because there was 80 millimetres of rain in June. That's a photograph of the twin row plot, and I think we worry on light land that too many plants too close together down the row come under too much pressure if there is a drought in prospect. So we prefer to keep plants further apart, so a wider row or a twin row is of interest. The trouble is it dilutes starter fertilizers and it increases seed costs if you up the seed rate, and with a low yield potential, we think that keeping seed costs low and keeping plants far apart from each other is a good idea. The experiment of subsoiling after the drilling was a disaster. It did not work. It moved the seed around too much. It left the surface slightly rough, and it not to be advised. There was no point in doing it. Okay, I think that's it. Any questions? Yes, Mike. Well, we wanted to compare it to the urea because we get told off for using urea because it volatilizes. So, yeah. Ammonium sulfate burns burns maize very easily. That would be the main problem. But yes, it's cheap. I've used a lot of ammonium sulfate, liquid ammonium sulfate, and rape in the past, but that's applied when it's very cold in January or February before the plant really gets going. But no, that's why. Yeah. Sorry, are we still using a digestate? Are we still using a starter fertilizer if we've used digestate? Pre-drilling, yeah. I think we are. Maybe we shouldn't be. To me, the starter fertilizer issue is still up in the air. I don't know really. I think you've got to get the nutrients to the maize crop somehow. So you might as well put some of them in the starter fertilizer. Whether we should be looking more at pop-up starter fertilizers, so less starter fertilizer, put even closer to the seed. I think they're doing that in Germany. We'll look into that. But I think we're still sticking with DAP as being as good as anything. But where you've got very high phosphate, then maybe you can use your Humastarts or your Maximase. That's a possibility. Right. Okay. If you use that much, I would agree with that. But we don't always use that much, do we? Yes. Yeah, did everybody hear that? Normally we use more like 35 max cubic meters of digestate, not 50. And if we use 50, we wouldn't use a starter fertilizer. Thank you, Seb. Yeah. Sorry, I can't hear. I've got very bad hearing. You should incorporate digestate. Don't put it on the surface. It should be shallow incorporated as a minimum. We don't we do some ploughing, but we don't plough all the land that has digestate by any means. We generally, I think it's fair to say, we generally plough in solid digestate, and it was interesting to see how good Paul was getting from just incorporating solid digestate. Solid digestate is very stable, so there's no desperate need to plough it under. You can leave it near the surface, and you shouldn't lose a huge amount of the fertilizer value in it. Whereas the liquid digestate is open to volatilization if it's warm and you put it on the surface. So it is important to shallow incorporate it if you can. Thank you. I'm relieved. Seb is nodding. So. Okay. Thank you. Back to you, John.